a gleaming Atlanta bank, a black man in a hoodie walks in to test his own company. But when prejudice rears its ugly head, he's about to unleash a truth that will shake the walls. Who is he really? And what secret will turn the tables? Stay tuned for a story of courage and karma. The Atlanta skyline shimmered under the late spring sun of 2025, its glass spires piercing a cloudless sky. Liberty Trust Bank's flagship branch stood at the heart of downtown, a fortress of marble and steel, its grand lobby a stage for wealth and ambition. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over polished counters, where tellers in navy blazers moved with practiced efficiency. The air buzzed with the clink of coins, the rustle of paperwork, and the low hum of privilege. At 9:10 a.m., Marcus Johnson pushed through the revolving doors, his steps deliberate, his presence unremarkable in a sea of suits and briefcases. In his mid-40s, Marcus carried himself with a quiet strength, his athletic build masked by a gray hoodie and black jeans faded at the knees. His black hair, close-cropped and flecked with gray, framed a face both resolute and weary. Dark brown eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, scanned the room, missing nothing. A faint stubble dusted his deep-toned skin, and a small silver stud gleamed in one earlobe, a relic of his younger days. To the untrained eye, he was just another customer, not the CEO who'd clawed his way from teller to the top of Liberty Trust. Marcus wasn't here to sign contracts or greet investors. Today, he was a ghost in his own empire, armed with a withdrawal slip for $50,000 and a mission to uncover the truth. Customer complaints had been mounting, tales of cold shoulders, extra scrutiny, and outright disrespect, especially toward clients of color. Reports showed disparities too stark to ignore, and Marcus, tired of sanitized summaries, needed to see it firsthand. He settled into a cushioned chair in the waiting area, phone in hand, but his attention was on the dance of service unfolding before him. A white executive in a tailored suit strode in, greeted with warm smiles, and ushered to a private desk bypassing the line. An elderly black woman, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn checkbook, was told to take a number. Her questions met with a dismissive wave. A young Latina in a nurse's scrubs waited at the counter, her ID checked twice, while a white college student's deposit sailed through with a friendly chat. Marcus's fingers tightened around his phone, each slide a needle in his skin. He'd faced this himself decades ago, starting as a teller in a polyester vest, proving his worth under skeptical gazes. After 40 minutes, Marcus approached the counter, his withdrawal slip crisp in his hand. Amy, a young teller with blonde hair and a tight bun, glanced up, her blue eyes narrowing as she took in his hoodie. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat, a stark contrast to the warmth she'd shown a white client moments before. Marcus slid his ID and bank card forward. "I'd like to withdraw $50,000, he said, his tone even, professional. Amy's fingers froze over the keyboard, her gaze flicking to his ID, then his face, as if searching for a mismatch. "That's a significant amount," she said, her voice rising just enough to draw eyes. She leaned toward Greg, a senior teller with slicked back brown hair and a cocky grin, whispering something that made him smirk. Greg sauntered over, his green eyes glinting with suspicion. "Got a problem here?" he asked, picking up Marcus's ID with exaggerated care, holding it to the light like a detective. "Accounts like this can have issues," he said, his tone heavy with implication. "We need to verify." Marcus stood tall, his glasses catching the lobby's glare. "It's my account," he said, his voice steady as stone. "My ID and card are valid. Process the withdrawal." Greg's smirk widened, his arms crossing defiantly. "We've seen suspicious activity on these types of accounts," he said, the word "these" a coded jab that echoed through the silent lobby. Heads turned, clients whispering, their stares a familiar weight on Marcus's shoulders. Amy shuffled, papers nervously, avoiding his gaze while Greg leaned closer, daring him to push back. The air thickened, a storm gathering in Marcus's chest. He'd built this bank on fairness, but its heart was beating with prejudice. What would he do when the empire he forged turned its back on him? The marble lobby of Liberty Trust Bank's Atlanta flagship branch pulsed with a brittle silence, the air heavy with unspoken judgments. Fluorescent lights glared off polished counters, casting stark shadows across the faces of clients and staff. Marcus Johnson stood at the teller window, his gray hoodie and black jeans a stark contrast to the tailored suits around him. At 45, his athletic frame was steady, his close-cropped black hair flecked with gray, his dark brown eyes calm behind wire-rimmed glasses. The silver stud in his earlobe caught the light as he faced Amy and Greg, their skepticism a wall, between him and his $50,000 withdrawal. Amy, her blonde bun tight, shuffled papers nervously, her blue eyes avoiding Marcus's gaze. Greg, with slicked-back brown hair and a smug grin, leaned on the counter, his green eyes glinting with challenge. "We need more verification," Greg said, his voice loud enough to draw stares. "Large sums like this raise red flags." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. "My ID and card are valid. I've followed your protocols. Process the transaction." The lobby's murmurs grew, clients craning their necks, phones discreetly raised to capture the scene. Before Greg could respond, Jason, another teller with a buzz cut and a cocky tilt to his lips, sauntered over. His hazel eyes flicked over Marcus's hoodie, his sneer barely concealed. "Probably one of those scam accounts," he muttered, loud enough for nearby clients to hear. "You got a reason for needing that much cash?" The question, laced with accusation, hung in the air. Marcus's fingers twitched, but he kept, his hand still, his composure a shield against their barbs. He'd faced this before, decades climbing Liberty Trust's ranks, dodging whispers about his skin, proving his worth in boardrooms that doubted him. The tension snapped when Sandra Miller, the branch manager, strode across the lobby, her heels clicking like a metronome. In her late 30s, she was a vision of corporate authority, her auburn hair swept into a sleek chignon, her gray skirt suit crisp. Her pale blue eyes were cold, her thin lips pursed as she zeroed in on Marcus. "What's the issue here?" she asked, her tone sharp, bypassing Marcus to address Greg. Greg handed her Marcus's ID, his smirk widening. "Says he wants $50,000. No explanation, just demands." Sandra's gaze flicked to Marcus, then to his ID, her fingers holding it like it might stain her manicured nails. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, $50,000 is a substantial amount. May I ask what it's for?" The question, unasked of white clients Marcus had observed earlier, was a slap. A white businessman had withdrawn $60,000 minutes ago, met with smiles and no questions. Marcus stood taller, his glasses glinting. "It's my money," he said. "I don't need to justify my withdrawal." Sandra's smile was a blade. "We have protocols to prevent fraud," she said, her words deliberate, "especially for certain account holders." The lobby grew quieter, the weight of her implication clear. Amy looked down, her hands fidgeting, while Jason snickered, leaning against the counter. Greg folded his arms, his grin a dare. Marcus felt the sting of their judgment, a familiar ache from his early days as a teller when managers questioned his every move. But he wasn't that rookie anymore. He was the CEO, undercover to expose the rot in his bank. The standoff intensified as Sandra leaned forward, her voice hardening. "If you can't comply, we can't assist you." Her eyes flicked to the security guards by the door, a silent signal. Marcus's pulse quickened, but his face remained a mask of calm. "I've complied," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of the lobby. "Your refusal is baseless." Sandra's cheeks flushed, her authority challenged in front of a growing audience. Phones were out, recording, the scene a powder keg waiting for a spark. Sandra straightened, her decision made. "Security," she called, her voice slicing the air. "Escort this man out." Two guards, burly and stone-faced, moved toward Marcus, their hands hovering near their belts. The lobby held its breath, eyes locked on the man in the hoodie, standing alone against a system rigged to doubt him. Marcus's hand moved slowly to his pocket, his dark eyes unwavering. What was he reaching for, and how would it shift the balance of power? The lobby of Liberty Trust Bank's Atlanta flagship branch was a pressure cooker, its marble floors reflecting the cold glare of fluorescent lights. Clients clutched their phones, recording the standoff, while tellers stood frozen behind gleaming counters. Marcus Johnson, mid-40s and unyielding, faced two security guards advancing toward him, their hands poised near their belts. His gray hoodie and black jeans marked him as an outsider in this polished world, but his dark brown eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, burned with quiet resolve. His close-cropped black hair, flecked with gray, and the silver stud in his earlobe caught the light as he reached into his pocket, ignoring Sandra Miller's sharp command to leave. Sandra, the branch manager, stood rigid, her auburn hair in a sleek chignon, her gray skirt suit a shield of authority. Her pale blue eyes flashed with irritation, her thin lips set in a line. "Put your hands where I can see them," she snapped, her voice echoing across the lobby. The guards hesitated, sensing the weight of Marcus's calm. He pulled out his phone, his movements slow, deliberate. "This is Marcus Johnson," he said into the device, his voice steady as steel. "I'm at the downtown branch being restrained for attempting to withdraw my own funds." The lobby's silence deepened, broken only by the tick of a wall clock. Sandra's cheeks flushed, her confidence fraying. "Hang up now," she ordered, stepping closer, her heels clicking like gunfire. Marcus ignored her, his gaze locked on the guards. "Security has their hands on me," he continued, addressing the phone. "I need you here, Michael." The name dropped like a stone, rippling through the room. Sandra's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "Michael? As in Michael Roberts, head of operations? Who was this man?" Behind the counter, Amy's blonde bun quivered as she clutched a stack of papers, her blue eyes wide with unease. Greg, his slicked-back brown hair gleaming, exchanged a glance with Jason, whose buzz cut and hazel eyes betrayed a sudden nervousness. Their earlier smirks faded, replaced by uncertainty. Marcus ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket, his composure unshaken. The guards, unsure, loosened their grip, one stepping back as if sensing a shift in the air. Marcus's mind drifted, the lobby's tension fading into memory. 20 years ago, he'd stood behind a counter like this, a teller trainee in a stiff polyester vest, his name tag glinting under harsh lights. A black kid from a working-class neighborhood. He had no connections, only a fire to prove himself. He'd worked nights for his Wharton MBA, turned failing branches into gold, and earned the CEO title through sweat and strategy. But every step up the ladder came with whispers, doubts about his fit, questions about whether clients would trust a black face at the helm. Those whispers had driven him here, undercover, to root out the poison in his bank. Back in the present, Sandra regained her composure, her voice icy. "You're causing a disturbance," she said, gesturing to the guards. "Remove him or I'll call the police." The taller guard, his face etched with reluctance, placed a hand on Marcus's arm. Marcus didn't flinch, his dark eyes meeting Sandra's. "You're making a mistake," he said, his words soft but heavy, a warning she didn't heed. Clients murmured, their videos capturing every second, the scene a viral storm in the making. Sandra's pale blue eyes blazed, her authority challenged in her own domain. She leaned forward, her voice a hiss. "People like you don't belong here," she said, the mask of professionalism gone, her prejudice laid bare. Amy gasped softly, her hands trembling, while Greg and Jason exchanged uneasy glances. The lobby felt like a stage, Marcus at its center, his dignity a beacon against their scorn. He'd faced this hate before, but never in the bank he'd built, the institution he'd poured his soul into. As the guard tightened his grip, a distant sound broke the tension, the sharp echo of footsteps approaching the grand double doors. Someone was coming, someone who could shatter Sandra's world. Who was Michael bringing, and what truth was about to explode? The marble lobby of Liberty Trust Bank's Atlanta flagship branch was a frozen tableau, its grandeur mocked by the raw tension crackling through the air. Chandeliers cast a sterile glow over polished counters, where tellers stood like statues, their navy blazers stiff with unease. Marcus Johnson, 45 and resolute, stood at the center of the storm, his gray hoodie and black jeans a quiet rebellion against the corporate sheen. His close-cropped black hair, flecked with gray, glistened under the lights, his dark brown, eyes steady behind wire-rimmed glasses. The silver stud in his earlobe gleamed as a security guard's hand lingered on his arm, poised to escort him out at Sandra Miller's command. Sandra, the branch manager, loomed before him, her auburn hair swept into a sleek chignon, her gray skirt suit a fortress of authority. Her pale blue eyes burned with defiance, her thin lips curled in a sneer. "You're done here," she hissed, her voice slicing through the silent lobby. "Security. Remove him now." The guard tightened his grip, but Marcus didn't flinch, his composure a wall against her venom. Clients clutched their phones, their recordings capturing every second while whispers rippled through the crowd. Amy, her blonde bun quivering, stared at the floor, her blue eyes wide with dread. Greg's slicked back brown hair caught the light as he smirked, his green eyes glinting with arrogance. Jason, with his buzz cut and hazel eyes, leaned against the counter, his snicker barely concealed. The grand double doors burst open with a thunderous crash, the sound reverberating like a gavel. Michael Roberts, head of operations, stormed in, his tailored navy suit crisp, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. His brown eyes blazed with fury, his square jaw set as he strode across the marble floor. "Release him immediately," he barked, his voice a whip that froze the guards in place. The taller guard stepped back, hands raised, while the other muttered an apology, his face paling. Sandra's confident facade cracked, her pale blue eyes darting to Michael, then Marcus, confusion twisting her features. Michael stopped beside Marcus, his presence a shield. "Do you know who this is?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the lobby, directed at Sandra and her team. Sandra stammered, her hands smoothing her skirt nervously. "He's a disruptive customer," she said, her tone faltering. Michael's gaze hardened, his hand gesturing to Marcus. "This is Marcus Johnson," he said, his words deliberate, resonant. "The CEO of Liberty Trust Bank, your boss." The revelation detonated like a bomb. Sandra staggered back, her auburn chignon loosening, a strand falling across her shocked face. Amy gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, tears welling in her blue eyes. Greg's smirk vanished, his green eyes widening as his arms fell limp. Jason's buzz cut seemed to bristle, his hazel eyes darting as if seeking an escape. The lobby erupted in murmurs, clients whispering furiously, their phones still rolling. Marcus stood tall, his dark brown eyes sweeping the room, his dignity unshaken despite the humiliation he'd endured. From the bank's headquarters, a conference room buzzed with panic. Board members, their suits wrinkled from urgency, watched the scene unfold on security feeds. Jonathan Davidson, the chairman, slammed a fist on the table, his face ashen. "That's our CEO," he growled, his voice tight with rage. "Record, everything." Technicians scrambled, pulling footage of the morning's transactions, revealing a damning pattern. White clients served with smiles, minorities met with suspicion. The evidence was undeniable, a stain on the bank Marcus had built. Back in the lobby, Sandra's voice trembled. "Mr. Roberts, I had no idea," she said, her pale blue eyes pleading. Michael cut her off, his tone icy. "You didn't need to know his title to treat him with respect." Marcus stepped forward, his glasses catching the light, his voice low but commanding. "I came here as a customer," he said, addressing the staff, his words carrying the weight of years. "I saw how you treat those who don't fit your mold. Black, Latino, elderly, working class. This isn't the bank I built." The crowd hushed, hanging on his words. Marcus's mind flashed to his journey, nights studying for his Wharton MBA, turning failing branches into successes, facing boardroom doubts about his image. He'd fought for fairness, but here in his own bank, prejudice thrived. Sandra's face drained of color, her authority crumbling. Greg and Jason exchanged panicked glances, their earlier bravado gone. Amy's tears spilled, her silence a confession of complicity. Michael turned to Marcus, his brown eyes softening. "I'm sorry you had to endure this," he said, his voice thick with regret. Marcus nodded, his gaze steady. "It's not just me," he said. "It's every client you've dismissed." The guards stood back, their faces etched with shame. The lobby felt like a courtroom, Marcus the judge, his verdict imminent. As Sandra's hands trembled, the weight of her actions bore down. What justice would Marcus deliver to those who betrayed his vision? The marble lobby of Liberty Trust Bank's Atlanta flagship branch stood hushed, its chandeliers casting a pale glow over a scene thick with reckoning. Marcus Johnson, 45 and unshakable, faced his stunned staff, his gray hoodie and black jeans a stark contrast to the corporate polish around him. His close-cropped black hair, flecked with gray, framed dark brown eyes that burned with quiet authority behind wire-rimmed glasses. The silver stud in his earlobe glinted as he surveyed the room, his dignity a beacon after the humiliation he'd endured. Clients, their phones still recording, watched in awe, the air electric with anticipation. Sandra Miller, the branch manager, stood frozen, her auburn chignon unraveling, a loose strand falling across her ashen face. Her gray skirt suit seemed to wilt, her pale blue eyes wide with panic. Amy, her blonde bun trembling, clutched the counter, tears streaming down her cheeks, her blue eyes red-rimmed. Greg's slicked-back brown hair was disheveled, his green eyes darting as his earlier smirk dissolved into fear. Jason, his buzz, cut bristling, gripped the counter, his hazel eyes hollow with dread. Michael Roberts, head of operations, stood beside Marcus, his silver hair catching the light, his navy suit crisp, his brown eyes blazing with righteous anger. Marcus's voice cut through the silence, calm but unyielding. "Sandra, Greg, Jason," he said, locking eyes with each in turn. "You're terminated, effective immediately." The words landed like thunder, reverberating across the lobby. Sandra gasped, her hand flying to her chest, her authority shattered. Greg staggered back, his face draining of color while Jason's knees buckled, his snicker replaced by a choked breath. Amy sobbed, her silence throughout the ordeal now a weight she couldn't escape. "Your actions violate everything this bank stands for," Marcus continued, his tone measured but fierce. "You judged me, and countless others, by appearance. Not merit," the crowd murmured, their videos capturing the moment, a viral wave ready to crash. Marcus turned to Amy, his gaze softening but firm. "Your silence made you complicit," he said. "You're suspended, pending retraining. Prove you can change." Amy nodded, tears spilling, her hands trembling as she wiped her face. The Tiende guards, who had nearly dragged Marcus out, stood by the doors, their faces etched with shame, their hands clasped nervously. Michael stepped forward, his voice resonant. "This branch is under review," he announced, addressing the staff. "Security footage from today shows a pattern. White clients favored, others dismissed. That ends now." He gestured to the screens above the counters where footage played. A Latina nurse's ID scrutinized, a black couple ignored, an elderly Asian man waved off. Clients gasped, their whispers turning to outrage as the truth unfolded. Marcus had seen it all, his undercover mission exposing a fracture in the bank he'd built from nothing. His mind drifted to the early days, when he was a teller in a cramped branch, his polyester vest a badge of ambition. He'd faced sneers from clients, doubts from bosses, yet he'd risen, through loan officer roles, regional management, and a Wharton MBA earned on sleepless nights. As CEO, he'd fought for a fairness, but today's betrayal cut deep. This wasn't just about him. It was about every client who'd been diminished, their trust betrayed by a system that should protect them. Marcus addressed the crowd, his voice steady but passionate. "Liberty Trust was founded on equality," he said, his glasses catching. The light. I built this bank for everyone, not just those who look a certain way. We'll make this right, for every customer who's been wronged. Clients nodded, some clapping, their respect palpable. Sandra, Greg, and Jason stood like shadows, their careers in ruins, their prejudice exposed. Sandra's lips quivered, but no words came, her power stripped away. From the headquarters, board members watched the live feed, their faces grim. Chairman Jonathan Davidson scribbled orders: retrain staff, audit branches, release a public apology. The footage was a legal bombshell, evidence of systemic bias that could redefine the bank's future. Marcus's stand was more than a moment. It was a movement, a call to dismantle the inequities he'd uncovered. As Sandra gathered her purse, her hands shaking, Marcus turned to Michael. "We start with accountability," he said, his brown eyes resolute. "But it's not enough. We need change. Deep, lasting change." Michael nodded, his silver hair gleaming as he clasped Marcus's shoulder. The lobby buzzed with possibility, the clients dispersing, their videos already spreading online. But Marcus's work was just beginning, the weight of his mission heavier than ever. What would Marcus's vision rebuild, and who would dare to resist it? The Atlanta sun dipped low, casting golden rays through the glass facade of Liberty Trust Bank's flagship branch. The marble lobby, once a stage for prejudice, now hummed with a quiet resolve. Marcus Johnson stood at its heart, his gray hoodie and black jeans a symbol of his undercover truth. At 45, his close-cropped black hair, flecked with gray, framed dark brown eyes that shone with purpose behind wire-rimmed glasses. The silver stud in his earlobe gleamed as he faced a new day. His athletic frame steady after the storm he'd unleashed. Clients moved through the counters, their faces reflecting a cautious hope, the air free of the tension that had choked it hours before. Sandra Miller, Greg, and Jason were gone, their desks cleared, their prejudice a stain erased from the bank's legacy. Amy, her blonde bun neat again, worked quietly, her blue eyes focused, her suspension a chance to prove herself. Michael Roberts, his silver hair catching the light, stood by Marcus, his navy suit crisp, his brown eyes warm with pride. The security guards, now retrained, nodded respectfully as Marcus passed, their earlier shame replaced by deference. The lobby's screens, once flashing ads, now displayed a new message. Liberty Trust, equal service for all. Marcus's actions had rippled beyond the branch. At headquarters, board members finalized sweeping reforms, mandatory bias training, audits of every branch, and a public apology drafted by Marcus himself. Security footage from the confrontation had gone viral, sparking debates on social media about fairness in banking. Clients shared stories of their own, slights ignored, IDs over-scrutinized, fueling a movement Marcus hadn't anticipated. He'd launched an initiative, Trust for All, funding financial literacy for underserved communities, ensuring no one felt like an outsider in his bank. His mind drifted to the past, to a young Marcus in a teller's vest, dreaming of a bank where merit trumped bias. He'd faced doubters at every turn, clients who flinched at his black face, executives who questioned his fit. Yet he'd risen, his Wharton MBA and record-breaking leadership silencing skeptics. Now, as CEO, he stood not just for himself, but for every client who'd been diminished, their dignity restored by his courage. The branch felt alive again, its pulse aligned with the vision he'd fought for. Outside, Atlanta's skyline glowed, a testament to progress and struggle. Marcus stepped onto the sidewalk, Michael at his side, as clients approached, some to thank him, others to share their stories. A young black woman clutching a loan application smiled shyly. "You make me believe I belong here," she said. Marcus nodded, his glasses catching the sunset, his heart full. This was why he'd risked it all, to rebuild trust, to forge a legacy of equality. For those who love social justice stories, this tale reflects a harsh truth. Systemic bias persists, even in 2025. In the U.S., studies show Black and Latino Customers face longer wait times and stricter scrutiny in banks. A legacy of decades-old redlining. Marcus's fight echoes real efforts to dismantle these barriers, reminding us that change starts with courage. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it, and subscribe to join our fight for equality. Comment justice below. What does fairness mean to you? Social justice. Banking equality. Marcus looked to the horizon, his vision clear. The bank was his, but the future belonged to those who dared to rebuild it with him. What new battles awaited, and who would rise to meet them?